Welcome back to the channel, guys. I do appreciate each and every one of you, and this is going to be an interesting video series, and I want to share with you a very unique perspective that I have on the fishing industry as a whole here in Michigan. So some of you may be aware of the fact that I actually am a sales rep for a fishing tackle distributor here in the state of Michigan. If you're not aware of that, well, now you are. With that, I have an interesting perspective throughout the entire state that most anglers don't get to have. And I thought it would be cool to actually share some of this info with you. This is all the same information that I make available to my customers, and I share with them to help them make decisions for their store. And some of this, maybe there's new products that I think will fit their niche. I let them know about it based off of sales that might be happening elsewhere within the territory that the company I work for takes care of. But I want to focus mainly in this series of videos strictly on sales here in Michigan, the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula combined. And it took me probably a week to 2 weeks to just dissect and break down all this data. And I have a few key segments I think will be really appealing to you guys, my viewers. And I thought it'd be cool to kind of put it on video for you. Now, the first category that I would like to cover is actually fishing lines. That is something that is always hotly debated on the forums, in the Facebook groups, at the dock, in the boat. We always have a discussion of who makes the best line and why. Well, what I'm going to share with you is a lot of the broad information that I have available, and I'm going to actually go over the top, 5 or so brands encompassing all types of line. I'm going to talk about fluorocarbon, monofilament, and superlines such as your braids and your fused lines like Fireline and Power Pro. And I'm going to actually let you know what the rankings of all those are in the top 5 based off of sales history that I have access to here in the state, and some other data sets that I might have available for other series coming up after this video. We'll also be talking about other things such as reels. I'm actually going to cover in another video what the top colors in a Senko are. So if there's a certain category of lures that you're curious about, let me know down in the comments and let me know what you want me to do. And if I have some good details, some good information to share with everybody, I feel confident that, that is the very accurate information for the state as a whole, I'm going to share it with you. So let me know down in the comments if you have anything else you want me to cover. And also, if you find any value in this video or any of my videos at all, give it a thumbs up. So first up, what we're going to cover are the top 5 brands of fishing line in the state of Michigan. Now, this is going to include all types of lines: superline, fluorocarbon, leader line, monofilament. You name it, we're going to encompass it all into one category by brand. So starting this off, number 5, I actually basically have a dead heat at number 5. It's actually split between Maxima and P-line. P-line is definitely more of a bass fishing line and a little bit of steelhead fishing here in the state of Michigan. And Maxima, for the most part, is really the bread and butter steelhead line here in the state. So that is part of the reason why both are very popular, but also are dead heat for 5th place. Number 4 is going to be Suffolk. Suffolk is actually manufactured by Rapala. They make mono, fluorocarbon, nano superlines, and superlines. Number 3 is going to be Seaguar. Seaguar, primarily in the state of Michigan, is going to be fluorocarbons, your leader lines and your main lines, your Invisex, your Red Label, your salmon steelhead stuff, Those are extremely popular. So a lot of leader lines, a lot of main lines for bass fishing and salmon fishing there again. Next up, and this is a really interesting one, and a lot of people are not aware of just how popular this particular brand is, and that is Power Pro. Power Pro sells the second most line, period, in the state of Michigan. And quite honestly, it is really, really close to the #1 spot here in the state of Michigan. And Power Pro is strictly braid, nothing else. And a few years back, I saw a report from Smithwick and Associates, which is kind of like a data collecting service and kind of digs into countrywide data and also worldwide data in some regards. And they said that Power Pro was 30% of the line market worldwide. And if you think about it, that's absolutely incredible when you think about all the line brands that are out there and how few varieties they actually offer. It's really, really, really tremendous. #1 is going to be Pure Fishing, aka Berkley. Now, the only reason Berkley is the #1 slot is strictly because of how many brands are inside the umbrella now. You have your Berkley braids, your Berkley monos, you have your Trilene, your Stren, your Spider Wire, and your Fireline brands inside that umbrella company. So if you look at the amount of offerings, it's really tough to really kill them and be #1 just because they offer so many different varieties of line and so many different brands that have been around for a long, long time. So the next step 5, I want to talk about superlines. Superlines are your braids that are made out of Dyneema, Spectra fiber, or those nanofibers like Nanofil. There's a Nano braid from Suffolk. There's a couple of them out there. You know, they're like they're unifilament, but they're made out of superline material. So I do lump them all with the superline category. So #5 in the state of Michigan is actually Suffolk's 832. Very good performing line. It's got the Gore-Tex running through it, so it sheds water really, really nicely. Next up is going to be Daiwa J Braid, the 8 carrier version of it. So that's 8 strands versus the 4 strand. 4 strand's a little bit newer. I actually got a spool of it right here, and I'm going to try it out. I have not tried the 4 strand yet, so I'm looking forward to trying it out this year. #3 is really interesting to me, and that's actually Spider Wire Stealth. I've said for a long time, if you want to save a few bucks and you can't afford Power Pro, but you still want to have that performance, Spider Wire Stealth is the next best thing in that style of superline. #2, and I think a lot of this is actually dictated to the Detroit River, St. Clair River walleye jigging market, and that's Fireline. That's the Fuse superline made out of Dyneema. That's the regular Fireline Crystal, the Tracer, the metered, the Fireline braid that came out last year. So that's all that guy. That's #2. And like I said, in the top 5 brands category, Power Pro is #1 in braid, period, across the board, and by a very large margin. So if you tried a lot of other braids and you've been let down and you want that tried and true, check out Power Pro. You have a couple of different varieties. The basic Power Pro is a 4 carrier or a 4 strand braid. The Super Slick version 2 is actually an 8 carrier. Your Max Quattro is a high-end version of the 4 carrier basic Power Pro. Gives you a higher strength and a smaller diameter. And then they have some other specialty lines in there, but they're more geared towards saltwater, so they don't really fit the Michigan market. Next up, we're actually going to talk about monofilament. Monofilament is probably the most versatile line for the average angler out there. Easiest to handle, easiest to tie knots, but also the stretchiest, and you have to be conscious of what version you're buying to fit what you're doing. So this is a little interesting. I'm going to throw a top 6 in here just because it was such a tight race between a few different things in a couple spots. Number 5, I'm going to call it a dead tie between Stren Original and Sunline Super Natural. Stren's been around for a long, long time. If I remember right, they were the very first monofilament, nylon monofilament line on the market. They partnered up with DuPont way back in the day. I think it was the 70s. If some of my older followers correct me if I'm wrong back there down in the comments. And then my personal favorite, which is Sunline Supernatural. That is the one that I use an absolute ton, and I love it, and I'd love to see more people try it in the state of Michigan. It is something that people are missing out on, and I'll probably do a video later on this year kind of highlighting that line and going more in depth of why that line is so good and so special. Number 4 is actually going to be Suffix Elite. Suffix Elite is the easy casting version of the Suffix monofilament. It's the red package. Number 3 is going to be a tie, and this is an interesting one, between Maximo Ultra Green and Zebco Outcast. If you've never heard of Zebco Outcast, that's probably because it is a value line. It's a very inexpensive line. You buy it in quarter-pound spools or eighth-pound spools, you know. So it's not a premium line. It's just it's a good line for a backer. A lot of the kids' poles end up with stuff similar to it out there. So it's just a value line, very inexpensive. That's why a lot of shops stock it for the guy that doesn't have money to put towards even, Trilene XL or XT at $5.99 a spool. Number 2 is actually Trilene XT. XT stands for extra tough. It's a very stiff mono. I wouldn't say stiff, not like a leader line mono, but it's a stiffer mono. Takes abrasion extremely well, has a decent amount of stretch. It's a really tough line. A lot of the salmon fishermen will fish that in 20-pound or 25-pound on their downriggers. Over on the west side of the state, a lot of fishermen actually tie their stinger hooks with it on the Detroit River and St. Clair River. So it's a really versatile line. Bass fishermen have been using it for eons. And if I can't get Sunline Supernatural on my baitcasters, I actually run XT. The number 1 line, period, and I actually took out pony spools because not all lines are available in pony spools, so I wanted to make it as even as possible, still is Trilene XL, America's number 1 selling monofilament line still to this day. As far as I know, it is. In Michigan, it definitely is by a lot. It's their extra limp, casts extremely well, fishes well on your spin cast, or aka your closed face reels and your spinning reels. So next up is Fluorocarbon line. And I want to break fluorocarbon up into a couple different subcategories. And that's because fluorocarbon originally really came out as a leader line and is still used a ton strictly as a leader line for people. But with bass fishing evolving with the drop shotting and the spy baiting, a lot of these finesse tactics, the demand for a fluorocarbon line that handles extremely well when actually on a spool, on a reel, companies have began developing very limp versions of fluorocarbon so we can use it on reels as a main line much easier. And number 5 on this list is going to be Trilene 100% fluorocarbon, the professional version of it. That is used for a leader line quite often by bass guys, but also it's used as a main line quite often by bass guys, and it is primarily a bass fishing line in the state of Michigan, but there is some salmon applications and guys that use it for that. Number 2 is probably the first true mainline fluorocarbon that a lot of us had experience using, and that's Berkeley Vanish. And I did take the pony spools out of that number to get it into 4th place. If I threw the pony spools in, it probably would be in the 3rd place spot. Now, the 3rd place spot is actually Seagar Red Label. Now, Seagar Red Label is not a premium fluorocarbon, but it's not a basement bargain, really crappy fluorocarbon. It's a good mainline fluorocarbon. It's not unbelievably clear compared to some of the other ones that you're going to hear on the list here. It handles fairly well. It's just a good line. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's fair. Number 2 is another Seaguar line, and it's Seaguar Invisex. Seaguar Invisex is literally, quality-wise, out of the most popular ones, neck and neck with number 1. There's pros and cons comparing, Seaguar here at number 2 and what number 1 is. And it kind of depends on your fishing style and the reels you're using, the equipment you're using, which one kind of performs a little bit better for you. But 1 and 2 are both excellent choices for a main line, and plenty of guys do use these two for leader lines for your steelhead guys, and also for you bass guys. Number 1 is gonna be Sunline FC Sniper, hands down, by a lot. I know it's got a huge following in certain areas on the west side of the state over Seaguar. I know here on St. Clair, it is probably the dominant fluorocarbon that most bass fishermen are using. It's just an all-around great handling fluorocarbon. Works well on bait casters, works well on spinning reels. So that's the top 5 on main lines. On leader lines, this is an interesting one. So it's really, it's an interesting one because things really get kind of jumbled up here. Number 5 is Maxima for leader lines, and that's definitely driven by the steelhead salmon category. Number 4 is Suffix, and Suffix and Maxima could probably flip-flop different years in that area for a leader line, and Suffix does a really good job on the ice fishing leader line category, so that's a good one there. Number 3 is actually Sunline. They don't offer a ton of leader lines, but when you kind of look at FC and a couple other ones that they offer as a leader line in the past, which this year there's a new offering that's just straight leader line that we're carrying, so that will probably change a little bit. That's where it ends up falling there. Number 2 would be Berkeley Trilene, so that's the Vanish stuff. There's a leader version of Vanish, and there's a standard casting version of the leader Vanish. And now a lot of that is probably due to the cost of it, why it ranks so high in this list. And then number 1 for leader fluorocarbon, hands down, is Seaguar. Salmon steelhead really dominate this kind of area in the category. So fluorocarbon leader line Seaguar is number 1. So that's it for talking about lines, and I hope some of this was actually helpful or just downright interesting for you. If it was, let me know down in the comments. The next video in this series, I'm actually going to talk about reels, and there might be a couple surprises in here that you may not be aware of. So make sure that you are subscribed down below. Make sure you have that notification bell set to all so you get notified when I post my next video in this series. And as always, guys, tight lines, happy casting. We'll see you in the next video.
If you decide to drop your buckets where you are and develop your gifts,